So let's get the latest on our top story today, and the continuing strikes are going on. Today's strike is being called by the ASLEF union, and I'm joined now by Mick Whelan, who's the General Secretary.
Good morning.
So very good morning to you. Thanks so much for coming in, Mick Whelan. So today's action will be the drivers' sixth coordinated day of strike action since last summer. Have you made any progress with either the rail companies or the governments in that time?
Very little. It's been a long ongoing process. I've attended every negotiation personally. And I think we're as far away now as we were at the start, unfortunately.
There have been some newspaper reports today that have suggested that the government might be on the brink of offering workers a new pay deal. The suggestion is it would be worth around £2,000 a year. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Well, it's nice that they tell the newspapers and the media before they tell us, the people that have actually been in the talks. And obviously we'd like to know what strings go with it. I mean, as we enter 2023, this is the fourth year without a pay rise. And we'd normally this time of year, be getting ready to go into pay talks for 2023. We've seen inflation during a period of time run at 14%, in double digits this year. So the figures that are being spoke about don't really put a dent in the cost of living crisis.
So if that was offered to you, would you reject it?
I'd have to have a look at it first. I mean, the idea that people float stuff and then you're asked whether you'll accept it or not without seeing the details and strings that go with it is very, very difficult to comment on.
How difficult do you think it is to get the public on board when you're talking about pay? Because there might be some people that say train drivers are paid quite well, aren't they? I think looking at some of the figures, train drivers earn an average of around £48,500, starting salaries around £30,000. They might say nurses, for example, are paid a lot less.
Well, I think nurses should have what we have. I believe the fire brigade and public sector's workers, I believe that teachers and vocational staff should have what we have. But I've never been quite in the game of politics and envy. Nobody's actually ever given us anything. Over the course of privatisation, we've given massive productivity and flexibility to generate what we've got. And this idea then that we shouldn't have a pay rise for 10 years to allow other people that are underpaid to catch up with this is quite not one we subscribe to.
What about how these negotiations have been carried out? There are also some suggestions around that the government is looking to try to strike a deal with the RMT, with ASLEF rather, in a bid to isolate the RMT. Have you heard anything about that? Do you see any signs of that?
I saw it in the papers yesterday and it's nonsense. We won't do that. I mean, we have our strike and we're doing what we're doing. I've got great praise for my comrades and colleagues in the RMT. We're fighting an existential battle where they want to take away 50% of people's jobs and degrade what's left. And I think if the government gets away with what it's doing, we'll be left with an inherently unsafe railway system. We'll have other problems. Our problem is that we work for 15 privatised companies that we're on strike with today, and they've done a rather corrupt deal with the government that won't allow a pay rise to take place, all the talks to take place through free collective bargaining, which they should do.
But what about the government's argument that there isn't a bottomless pit of money? They can't necessarily afford to pay everybody who's asking for pay rises what they're asking for. So
we didn't seek a pay rise during the pandemic and we went to work. During that period of time, the people we worked for made £500 million in profits. If you look at Companies House and the pay rises of directors, the dividends that have been paid and profits made by the rail operating companies, it seems that wages are no longer part of their fixed costs, that they can pay dividends to their shareholders out of the taxpayers' purse, but the people who actually generate those dividends don't get a share.
This is a frustrating time for passengers, isn't it?
Look, I'd much rather be talking to you about a green agenda. I'd like to talk about safer railways, investment, growing railways. I'd like to go back to my day job, if I'm honest. But we are where we are. And, if we don't raise our issues and articulate our voice, no one's listening to us. I wouldn't be on here today unless we were on strike, would I? Well,
the government clearly feels that passengers are frustrated. They're talking about new anti-strike legislation, aren't they? They're talking about minimum service guarantees. There's some suggestion around that could even potentially mean that strikes could be deemed illegal if unions refuse to provide that minimum level of service. What do you make of those reports?
Well, we already have the most draconian and authoritarian strike laws and trade union laws in Europe. Only Lithuania had worse, and I think more recently with the trade union bill we actually outdid them. We have seen our counterparts in Europe introduce minimum strike levels that are unworkable. The idea then that in companies that don't fully employ enough people, that people could be forced to come to work when they legitimately and legally should be on strike would be difficult to see how it could be done. But we'll look at the detail of those laws. If we have to comply with them, we will. It's more likely to lead to longer strife and a different form of action, because there will be a knock-on effect by anything that happens.
And would you consider taking legal action against the government if a policy like that were to be introduced?
We're currently with 11 other trade unions taking legal action against the last set of laws they put in place, and we would look at doing that in future as well.
Looking at some of the figures, they're quite startling this week, aren't they, about the amount of money that people are losing from the hospitality sector, for example, because of rail strikes. Doesn't there have to be some sort of minimum service to allow people to run their businesses, allow people to go to work?
Well, the real problem is the logistics of the railways. Trains run round to be in the right places for the peaks. Minimum service levels that subsequently got negotiated on a company-by-company basis, when you look at something as complex as the interconnectivity of the railway, to my mind is unworkable. And at what point does it become unsafe? What would the level be? Would it be 20%? Would it be 30%? Would the only way to run a safe railway be 100% and take away the right to strike totally? What sort of democracy are we aiming for?
Rishi Sunak has said his door is always open to the negotiations. When do you next expect to have talks with the government and with the rail companies?
I met with the Transport Minister and the Rail Minister before Christmas, and they dropped me a note saying that the Rail Minister is now going to be facilitating the talks. I meet with the Rail Minister on Monday. I'm hoping shortly after that we get back into a round where we have effectual talks and can resolve the situation.
You said you're in it for the long haul, though. How long do you think this could go on?
Well, when you're asked the question about how long will you do something for, you do it till you find a resolution. So if it has to be the long haul, it will do. I was also asked the question, will there be more strikes? And I said that we've just reinforced all our mandates. Now people are saying we should go harder and faster. Now, we haven't done that yet.
OK, well, Mick Whelan, we appreciate you coming in. I imagine you're going down to the picket line now, are you?
I've got one or two media things to do, then I'm on the picket line at Euston and King's Cross. Thank you.
OK, thanks very much indeed for your time.